Rotator cuff issues are one of the most common shoulder complaints out there, and a lot of times it stops people from exercising, but not you, because you're going to listen to this podcast and understand exactly what you need to do to get your workouts in, even if you have a rotator cuff issue. We're going to cue our introduction, and we're going to dive right into this conversation. Hey, welcome back, exercisers, to the Exercise is Health podcast, brought to you by Exercise for Life Studios, where we believe that your health is your most valuable asset. And the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise as geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. We're your hosts, Charlie
and Julie.
And today we're discussing this idea of what do you do for a workout if you're having a rotator cuff issue, because so often issues throughout the body, and specifically the rotator cuff issue, often stops people from exercising altogether. But if you've listened to our show for any period of time, you know that the key to living a long, healthy, strong life is to make sure you're able to exercise consistently. So how do you get a workout in even if you're having a rotator cuff issue? That's exactly what we're discussing today. But before we get into that conversation, we have a favor to ask for you.
That's right. Podcasts like this thrive on reviews from listeners like you. So if you've listened to our content and benefited, it has changed your life or changed your health, we would love to hear from you. If you wouldn't mind pausing the show now, scrolling down, and leaving us that 5-star rating and review, we would greatly appreciate it. Also, we wanted to let you know that coming up, starting on January 7th, we do have our next One Workout Away Challenge. This is our 28-day Facebook challenge. So it will be you guys and us in a private Facebook group. We're going to walk you through one we're calling Moving and Mobile this year. And this One Workout Away Challenge is going to be focused on cardio bursts and increasing your mobility and flexibility. So especially if you are having a rotator cuff issue, this would be a great one to join in, because we're going to help you stay moving, keep the cardio up, and we're going to teach you a lot of mobility, movement things that are really going to help not only improve your flexibility, but improve the strength even in this more sensitive area right now. To sign up for this OWA, go to www.exerciseforlifestudios.com/OWA.
All right, Julie, I have a question for you.
Okay.
And I want a very specific answer. Like, I want the exact number of times this has happened throughout your career.
Okay.
Where you're supposed to be working with a client and then they contact you like a day or two before, maybe even the day of, to say, you know what, I can't come in because one area of my body is really bothering me.
It happens all the time.
All the time. So we can't even give like a specific number, because it's something that is very common. And not that like people are getting injured all the time, but the mindset, the idea of like, well, one area of my body is bothering me, and so because of that, I can't work out at all, is something that is very common. And not just like with, clients that we work with, but, just throughout the population. It's like, well, I was working out and then I hurt my knee, and then I stopped working out. And it's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. It's like this accepted answer, because one area of your body, there's an issue. All right, now all of a sudden, like, you can't work out at all. And so what we want to talk with you about today is, first of all, we need to change that, okay? And then secondly, how would you work out if a very specific area of your body, namely the rotator cuff, which is a group of muscles within your shoulder, are bothering you, which is a very common issue that a lot of people do experience.
That's right. I have to say, this is one of the ones that when I get a cancellation for this, I'm like, ugh! Because like you and I, we're highly trained on how to keep people healthy, strong, and actually improve the area even when there's a specific area that's bothering you. Like, oh, my back is hurting, I need to cancel my PT session. Oh, my foot's hurting. But again, that's like very common, and it's a common mentality, an acceptable mentality that a lot of people have, that like, oh, if my fasciitis is flared up, I should just not exercise. Which actually doing the exact opposite, continuing with your exercise, is going to really change the trajectory of this injury and the likelihood of it returning. But there's very specific things you need to know. And I think actually I do have a handful of clients that do now know, like after working with me for a while, oh, okay, it's different there.
It's mostly a newer client thing, like somebody who's used to like the traditional way of going about working out and stuff. They're like, oh, well, there's no way I could work out, because I have this one ailment going on.
Yes.
Because I think the flip side question to that is, How many times have you had a client come in and they're saying like, this area is really bugging me at the start, and then by the time they finish, they're like, wow, like I don't notice it at all. It feels amazing. Like
all the time.
Yeah, and then that happens all the time as well. So it's like once somebody can have that kind of experience, they realize that the idea of like, okay, well, I shouldn't work out at all because I have an issue in one area of my body, it just doesn't hold water anymore once you understand the principles that we're going to lay out for you today.
That's right. I actually have a really good example. This is not related to the shoulder, but we're going to jump into the shoulder. But I have a client who loves to ski, and for years before he worked with me, he's like, yeah, every year, like I know that in one of my 6 trips, I'm going to pull my groin, which then like pulls me out of exercise. I mean, how can I run? How can I cycle? How can I do legs? How can I, all these things. And I'm like, I get what you're coming from, but just come in and we're going to work through it. And he was amazed at how quickly we worked through the injury. So the injury went from being like a month-long issue to now 4 days, 2 sessions coming in, 4 days, because really the muscle system heals the fastest when it is stimulated appropriately. So when it's getting the right juice, when it's getting the right stuff, it improves much more quickly than just resting alone. And almost every joint issue you have or could have, problem with your knees flared up, hip problem, throw out your back, rotator cuff issue, frozen shoulder, plantar fasciitis, what else am I missing? Tendinitis, any of that kind of stuff, it is highly influenced by the muscle system. So if you are able to change the muscles around that joint and in your system, your whole body, you're going to facilitate the healing and getting back to it way faster, but you just need to know how. And in this podcast, we're going to break down the how, but we're also going to apply it to rotator cuff stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, also think about like when people have some kind of issue going on with their system, like what are the things, like just kind of generally speaking, that they normally think to do? I'm going to say they normally think that something would be really good if it could like increase blood flow to the area, just kind of like increase circulation. Like, oh yeah, this will help the healing process if there's increased blood flow. If I can kind of decrease inflammation in the area. So increase circulation, decrease inflammation, maybe get some kind of like, feel good hormones going on as far as, just like everything feeling good throughout the body and whatnot. And it's like, that's exactly what happens with exercise. Like you don't need to throw on a heating pad or go in a sauna in order to increase circulation. You can get up and like move around. You can, do these things that from an exercise perspective that increase circulation. When you do them appropriately for the body, they also decrease inflammation. And so there are all these effects that people try to get through means that aren't exercise that you can get with exercise that will actually help things kind of calm down from a pain and symptom perspective and start to promote the healing process. Just as a specific example rather, I tweaked something in my neck, like last month or whatever, doing something stupid while I was lifting. I wasn't paying attention to the principles that we lay out, and there's a reason why those principles are in place. I decided to disregard one of them in particular. I'm like, wow, yep, totally tweaked something in my neck. And what was so interesting is, number one, how quickly it resolved once I started following the principles again. But two, like the next day I got on our cycle bike. Okay, so something in my neck, I get on our bike, and by riding the bike, my neck starts feeling better. Is it because, the bike challenged my neck or worked my neck? No, but all the stuff that is normally said to help promote healing and kind of decrease symptoms and stuff, again, increase circulation, decrease inflammation. When you exercise appropriately for your body, all those things happen. And you can start to get this kind of systemic effect of like, wow, things are feeling much better. All right. So I want to kind of put that out there as well, so you understand that, yeah, there's a lot of merit, not only to like what we're about to say, but just to the idea of exercising in general, even if something within your body is not feeling 100%.
So our first principle is that when you have a specific area, like the rotator cuff, that's you feel like it's out of service, having problems, giving you symptoms, talking to you, telling you something's not right, it is still a good idea to keep the rest of your body in shape and conditioned. So, hear me out. A lot of times people get a shoulder issue and they're like, okay, now I can't work out for 6 weeks. Okay, well, I don't know. Maybe for 6 weeks you might need to treat your shoulder differently. But the rest of your body, your knees, your hips, all your muscles of your core, your feet, your calves, all the other areas of your body still need to stay conditioned. So this might challenge...
Your heart.
your heart, right? Like your cardiovascular system. Absolutely. This might challenge a lot of people. A lot of people are married to a way of exercise. And I get it. A lot of people have interests and, they want to do what they're interested in. So let's say you're having a rotator cuff issue and you are a CrossFitter, which almost every move in CrossFit involves your shoulders. You may need to explore some alternative options of how to stay in shape, how to keep active, how to keep your body moving without directly challenging or re-injuring or highlighting the issue that you currently have, which is very localized in your shoulder. So maybe doing something like starting doing running. And if that movement in your shoulder is too crazy, then maybe cycling or getting to regular type weight training, traditional, more controlled weight training, where you can designate areas that you're working and designate areas that are not working. So that first idea is, hey, we got to keep the rest of your whole body in shape. One area of your body being out of commission is not a good reason to lose complete fitness to the rest of your body. And by keeping the rest of your body in shape, it's only going to encourage healing in that area. So open your mind to finding new things that you can do that might leave out your shoulder. Another really good example that involves a lot of shoulder stuff is like yoga. So like if you're really into yoga, it's going to be hard to do a lot of those moves. I'm sure you can modify, but also saying, hey, I'm allowed to open my brain and explore new options on staying in shape while I'm not re-injuring, my shoulder that needs some healing time.
Absolutely. I mean, this is such a key point because it's like, all right, yes or no, do you think if you were stronger, you'd be able to heal faster than if you were weaker? Okay, yes or no, do you think if you were more physically fit, you'd be able to heal faster than if you were less physically fit? Yes or no, if you were more mobile, do you think you'd be able to heal faster than if you were less mobile and everything was stiff and tight and everything like that, right? And so even though one area of your body is out of commission, that does not mean that the rest of your body just now needs to start getting weaker, more deconditioned, and less mobile. If you keep up the strength and the conditioning and the mobility throughout the rest of your body, there's a strong likelihood that the area that is currently not optimal will start to heal faster. Like that whole process will take less time and you'll feel more ready to kind of get back to using those groups of muscles at a much faster pace than you otherwise would. Okay, so just if we can approach it with the mindset of like, okay, well, not working out is not an option, and just understanding that I can still work out the rest of my body, now all of a sudden everything else becomes a lot easier, okay? Because then when you go and start to work the area that may be a little bit more symptomatic, in this case, which is the shoulder, rotator cuff muscles and everything like that, that's when we start to move into the second principle or second step of this process, which is really utilizing the 4 exercise for life principles with the area that is more symptomatic. Yes, you want to use it for your entire system, but when it's specifically in the areas that are very symptomatic, you want to make sure that you are really keying in to using the 4 exercise for life principles.
When we're using the 4 exercise for life principles in the problematic area, the reason we're doing this is because we know that this type of stimulus, this type of exposure will help this area heal faster than resting alone. But again, remember, we can't just do anything, right? Because anything probably led us to something like this. But we're thinking about, okay, well, how do we strategize? As we say, okay, how do I strengthen this shoulder? I don't really know what to do. So we want to go back to our exercise for life principles. The exercise for life principles, as we apply it to the shoulder, is, hey, if you can do any motion with some kind of symptom-free range, we want you to strengthen that. So let's say you do a lateral raise, and you're like, well, my lateral raises usually go up to 90 degrees, but now that my rotator cuff is all flared up or locked up, I can do about 15 degrees of symptom-free range. Sweet. We want you to strengthen that 15 degrees range that you have of symptom-free range of motion. And then you say, okay, well, I can get my arms up to the start of a shoulder press, and I can only get about, halfway up, and then the top range is really symptomatic. Great. We want you to keep strengthening that bottom half. So sometimes we think about it and we're like, gosh, it's so modified. Is it really even doing anything for me? Yes, because we're applying this stimulus to now strengthen the shoulder where it's good and show wherever the shoulder's saying, hey, we're okay here. We're doing good here. Let's strengthen it. And we're leaving out the rest. We're not overthinking it. If it's painful, don't do it. But wherever it's not painful, keep strengthening in those ranges. So all of your shoulder strengthening exercises you can do as long as you're following the 4 exercise for life principles. I just touched on the first one, making sure it's pain-free, symptom-free range of motion, which is the one that's going to be the most affected. You're going to notice because whenever you have like a problem, your body's going to not give you as much motion. So our goal is don't push your motion. Stay within the pain-free range of motion. And then you also need to continue applying the rest of the Exercise for Life principles, even though they're going to be a little bit less affected, but this first range of motion one is going to be definitely the highlight one.
Yeah, that's going to be a big emphasis while you are working your upper body, is making sure you're within your symptom-free range of motion. Now, Julie, you brought up this idea of like, what part of the range? And somebody might be listening to this and you might be thinking, gosh, I can't even move at all. Like if I try to move it at all, then it's bugging me. It's like, okay, cool, then don't move it at all. Like just do isometrics. Just, you can have your arm just like right by your side and just do that muscle contraction, not moving, but just strengthening the muscle, focus on the contraction. And again, this doesn't have to be super hard. You can do it really, really, really light and just build from there. And then now all of a sudden it's like, okay, yeah, now I actually have a little bit more strength. I have a little bit more connection. I have a little bit more awareness of the area. And whether you get any more motion from that or not, now because you have a little bit more strength, a little bit more awareness, a little bit more connection, now you might be able to contract a little bit harder, might be able to strengthen a little bit more. And eventually, as it gets stronger and stronger and stronger, you'll be able to start to get more motion without it being symptomatic. So this is really a key thing. The other big point when it comes to this idea of working your upper body is don't be afraid to work the other side that is asymptomatic. Sometimes people are like, well, I don't want to, get sides like imbalanced or whatever. And actually research shows that if you have one side of your body that's injured, but you work the other side, the injured side will heal faster than if you don't work the other side and don't keep up the strength and don't keep up the function. So let's say it's your left shoulder that's really bugging you. Make sure that you're still doing exercise for your right shoulder, your rows, your presses, your, everything like that, that you would normally do for your workouts, even if you're not doing the same weight as you are with the left, even if you're not doing the same motion that you are with the left, still working that right side to its kind of within its capabilities, and that in of itself will also help the process move along faster from a healing perspective with that left side. The next thing to consider is making sure you are working areas of your body that are adjacent to the symptomatic area. So in this case, the rotator cuff area, we're just going to generally call that the shoulder, okay? So if you think about, all right, what areas are adjacent, meaning like a little bit, like essentially like right next to the shoulder. You more or less like have your trunk and we'll say like your elbow to your like your hands and wrist, okay? So those are the areas that are kind of like right next to your shoulder. So making sure that you are strengthening those areas, that you are keeping those areas moving well through specific strengthening, not necessarily through stretching or mobilizing or anything like that, but again, focused on the muscle contraction, focused on the strength, utilizing the 4 Exercise for Life principles, but really making sure that those areas are strong and functioning well. That can go a long way to not only helping support the shoulder, but as the shoulder continues to get stronger, if there are any weak links within those areas, it'll help kind of shore them up along the way.
That's right. So again, thinking about the injured area, the shoulder, and then what joint is on one side of it and what joint is on the other side. So when we're thinking about your core, which is the more like central joint, we want to make sure you're really focusing on strengthening your side bend motion, you're strengthening your rotation motion or your twisting motion, and you're really strengthening your spinal extension motion. There's no reason why you should leave out your crunches or your trunk flexion motion. So make sure you're just keeping your core really, really strong because it is like the neighboring muscle and it shares a lot of muscles with the shoulder. And then again, like Charlie said, making sure you're thinking about the other joint on the other side of the shoulder, which is your elbow down into your wrist. So making sure you're continuing to strengthen your biceps and your tricep exercises and all the exercises that you do down in your arm. Even if it excludes your shoulder, again, there's those layover muscles that will really be helpful. I think one thing is true with all injury, Charlie, and there's always 2 things that happen together, is that we usually get like a symptom, right? There's like a discomfort, whether that's like swelling or just hurting all the time, it's whatever. There's a symptom, a pain. And then there's always like a limitation in motion. Like your body will restrict motion. So you'll notice like every time you get an acute injury, there's a symptom and there's a change in motion. And although with exercise, we can't say this is a treatment for pain, right? That's more reserved for, I think, like medicine stuff. But we know that how we feel changes when we can change our range of motion or our ability to move. And the one thing that always holds true with our body is our body will only move where it's strong. And so that's why this entire podcast has been talking about how are we going to keep your strength, and when you are injured, how do you kind of tiptoe around this thing so that we can keep building strength so that your body can give you more motion. And what happens is that when you are strong, your body will give you more motion. It's not when you're flexible, not when you're mobile, not when you're double jointed or whatever, but when your body is strong, it gives you more motion. And when your body is weak, it gives you less motion. And whenever we get injured, it's like a temporary weakness. Like you might be like, what are you talking about, Julie? I work out all the time. Come on, I listen to this podcast, I do all the stuff, but now I have a shoulder injury. Maybe you slipped and fell or whatever. But still there's a temporary weakness in the area. And so now we have to approach it with this type of care of saying, hey, how can we approach this so that we can keep building strength? Because again, I'm not going to recoup this mobility without building strength, because your body will never give you motion if there's not strength. And if it does, then it's very vulnerable to injury. So we don't want to have that anyway. So always thinking in your head, how can I keep my body and this specific area very strong? And that will help me heal faster than just resting alone.
Absolutely, that is key. Now, if you're looking for guidance with this, we have a couple programs within the Exercise for Life membership that would really be worth your while to check out. One is called Full Motion, Full Strength, Full Function, and it really is going to teach you how to build your strength throughout your entire range of motion, whatever that is, and really utilizing your symptom-free range of motion. And the second program is called Resistance Training Building Blocks. And again, that's just going to help to really hammer home the 4 Exercise for Life principles and making sure that you are following those principles with every single exercise and every single workout that you do. And you can get in on these programs absolutely for free by going to www.exerciseforlifestudios.com. We'd love to see you in them. They've helped so many people. So if you are wanting some guidance with this as well, again, all you do is go to www.exerciseforlifestudios.com and start your free trial there. So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that is having a rotator cuff issue or that finds that they are inconsistent with their exercise because of different aches and pains and injuries that may come up with the rotator cuff? Share this episode with them so they can understand not only the importance of keeping the rest of their bodies strong and well-conditioned, but really how to think about their exercise for the area that is not feeling well. And while you're online, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps people find our podcast when they're looking for information on exercise and they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us a 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week.
This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Gates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.